we're going to talk about one Brian Tully. Yes, he announced his retirement the other day, and obviously we know his track record, especially in the Karen Reed case. And I wanted to bring in some guests this evening to get their thoughts. We will get into Brian Tully's retirement. We'll see what everybody thinks. Attorney Nan Gallagher's retired Mass State Police Todd McGee. Lots of shifting parts here in the last couple of months. Obviously, we have the Karen Reed criminal trials that have long passed, and Karen was ultimately acquitted of all the charges. She did get the one charge for the drinking and driving. But now we've been kind of in this kind of antiquated Karen Reed civil trial, and things are starting to ramp up. We're going to see some depositions here. I think in about a month, Brian Tully is getting scheduled to sit for one of those depositions. Let's open with this statement. So Brian Tully's retirement is not only just about one personal move. It lands with a very public sequence as high-profile testimony in the Karen Reed trial and the fallout from Michael Proctor's texts. Tully becomes the subject of an internal scrutiny and has transferred out of the Norfolk DA's office. Formal discipline of supervisory failures and exposed in the Karen Reed civil litigations and continue to overlap. And now we're hearing of all the things that have come out in Sandra Birchmore's controversy with federal documents that just got released. And we found out that Matthew Farwell's DNA was on the ligature that was used to kill her. I'm going to go Todd first. Todd, what do you think about this timing of this retirement?
Yeah, timing's everything, right? Never good when you hear federal investigations involved in any of your casework unless you were the investigator, right? So with that type of scrutiny, along with all that transpired over the two trials, I heard from my state police colleagues, wait till you hear the whole story. Wait till you hear the whole story. Well, all I saw was more fallout from police officers. Nothing further implicated Karen. So it makes me wonder what else behind the scenes that we haven't been privy to yet is to come. I'm looking here in the chat. Tully won't lose his pension. He's leaving on his own accord. That's his decision to do so. But that does not exonerate any future proceedings that might be happening down the line based on any type of misconduct that was discovered. So he'll still be on the hook for that. So we'll see how things play out. Again, this has been a story that keeps on giving. We thought once we got a verdict that was going to be the end of it all, but things have just ramped up even more.
Someone sent me something the other day, Todd, about Tully's pension. From what I'm understanding, he's not fully vested, so he might only get, I think, 60% of his pension.
You have to have a completed 20 to get 60%, and then there's an incremental 3%, and you max out at 25 years. So he might be retiring as a lieutenant or a detective lieutenant with 20 years.
Man, what did you think when you first heard this and saw the article?
I guess I could say I wasn't surprised, because there just seems to be a precipitous falling of dominoes, one after another, and they're all coming down for different reasons and with different excuses. This one's being transferred here, this one's resigning, this one's retiring. All of the backstories are really just pointing in one direction, which is the lead law enforcement officers who have been involved in one way, shape, or form with some of these very important cases up in the Commonwealth are leaving. This is really done to try to avoid embarrassment or to draw more attention to some of the malfeasance and misconduct that's taken place. From a civil litigation standpoint, some of which is pending and some of which may be coming down the pike, you can resign, you can be fired, you can be disciplined, you can be laterally moved, and it's not going to avoid the ultimate arbiter of fact. And you're going to have to answer questions and be accountable for your actions, your inactions, whether or not you failed to hand over evidence, whether you mishandled evidence, whether there was anything at all that was a misstep. It's all going to come to light.
Yeah, I don't think that just retiring and running away is going to hide. Essentially, all this stuff, like you said, will definitely at some point come out. Here's a good question here, and I love it. So Anna's asking, does this mean Tully doesn't get union lawyers anymore?
Lieutenants and above are not part of the union. Only troopers and sergeants.
Interesting.
Yep. So this whole process was part of a criminal proceeding. I don't think that he'll have any type of state police representation as a civilian, but there could be a provision. I just don't know that. There is I think it's called the Commanding Officers Union. So there may be another layer for lieutenants and above, but it would be different than what Proctor had.
Now, his detective rank was, he was demoted, correct? So he was a detective lieutenant. I'm going to throw the conspiracy out there. Do you think maybe there was some backdoor conversation going on? We're going to strip you of detective, but we'll keep lieutenant so you have some certain protection. Could that be another angle that we look at this?
No, usually if there's a demotion, it's one step below, unless you've really stepped in it. I do know of a circumstance where a lieutenant was bumped all the way down to a trooper, but that happens very, very rarely. The fact that he went from detective lieutenant down to a lieutenant, that would have been part of whatever disciplinary action that came out of the colonel's office.
And we'll go through some history here, and you guys can jump in at any point if you'd like. And this goes to Tully here. June 2024, Tully testifies in the Karen Reed first trial as commander of the Norfolk DA's State Police Detective Unit. On the stand, he says that he had no evidence putting John O'Keefe inside the Alberts home. And he also says Proctor's texts were reported up the chain of command. We found out this in the IA investigation. While Mr. Tully and Mr. Fanning also knew about a lot of these Proctor text messages going back into February. And I remember when Proctor got asked to come in and sit for the investigative grand jury, they also ran to his house afterwards. And from what I'm going to assume and think here, that they wanted to find out what was going on inside of that testimony and probably wanted to know what they were asking Proctor. So then we moved to July 2024. Massachusetts State Police announced that Tully and Sergeant Yuri Buchanan were under active internal affairs investigations. Both remained on full duty at the time. October 2024, Tully was transferred out of the Norfolk DA's office and moved to a temporary assignment in the Division of Investigative Services. State Police Colonel Jeffrey Noble made the move in the best interest of the department public safety mission. Really? November of 2024, internal findings became public. Tully was ordered to forfeit 6 days of accrued leave for failing to supervise and discipline members of the unit and for positive valuations instead of documenting negative performances. ESS reports. Todd, if you want to kind of let everybody know what that is evaluations.
It's the EES system, Employee Evaluation System.
It's like a progress report. And in that report, we found Tully being supervisor of Proctor and Yuri Buchanan, gave them basically scores of 5-star across the board, knowing of all these text messages that Proctor had sent, knowing that Yuri Buchanan was in that text message chain and was liking texts that had eventually come out, but gave them kind of 5-star ratings. And why would you do that, Todd? Oh, because that affects pay.
Well,
right?
If an employee is substandard for whatever reason, there's a whole process. And if that process hasn't been documented, you as a supervisor look at. So if I'm substandard in my work, then I should have a record of counseling and I should have what they call an improvement plan. And so there's a whole behind the scenes process as to what a negative evaluation would mean and look like. So that obviously was not there. You're kind in your words, Brian. You can use the word rubber stamp.
Mm-hmm.
Nan, you want to jump in there?
I defer to Todd on the intricacies of the evaluation process within the Massachusetts State Police, but I will say that these really are rubber stamping. Where I have an interest is the fact that if Tully or anyone else was just rubber stamping the performance of those beneath them under their pay grade, so to speak, then not only does that undermine Tully or Fanning's credibility as witnesses, but it also just draws attention to the fact that this was rubber stamping and no one was really paying close attention to whether or not these officers were doing their jobs, doing it properly, and doing it with honor and integrity. And those are the types of things that Karen Reed, or even in the Sandra Birchmore case, where those litigants are going to want to point and say, no one was monitoring what was going on. The inmates were running the asylum, and by giving 5-star ratings and just patting each other on the back, it is tantamount to approving of it. It's good that, from a litigation standpoint, it's good that there's going to be people who draw negative inferences from this failure of oversight.
Do you think this is just like, hey, we're the gang that's going to stick together here. Nothing's going to infiltrate us. Don't worry, bro. I got your back. And then when the shit hits the fan, look what they all did. They kind of all turn against. They knew Proctor was going down. Do we look at this like, no one's going to touch us? We're Teflon. We'll just look out for each other. We'll just keep kind of passing the buck all along. And then all of a sudden you get caught up, and Tully and Fanning just go, yeah, Proctor's probably going to go down. Let's start protecting our own asses. Because look, what did Tully do? He went in and what? Signed an NDA. Signed an NDA about things that he disclosed at the Norfolk DA's office, and made that very prevalent during his IA testimony that I cannot talk about certain things that I talked about. And I guarantee you went in there and probably threw Proctor under the bus.
Yeah. And from a legal standpoint, whenever you have multiple parties in court who are defendants or answering for the culpability that's being alleged, it's always great when they start pointing the finger at each other, because they're just making the plaintiff's case. So we love that. If we as litigators will say, okay, just point the finger, it doesn't matter, because you all in some way, shape, or percentage are at fault. And a jury can apportion liability as to who really was at fault. Now that we're past Karen Reed's criminal trial, and you start to see all of these terminations, disciplinary action, resignations, etc. Now you're going to start to see very slowly, it was this person's fault, or I thought this person did it. So that is a wonderful environment for people who want to have retribution for all that has gone wrong here. With self-preservation mode, you'll start to see a lot of insight as to who really was at fault, because it's every man for himself.
We may look like the band of brothers in the beginning, but then when the bottom starts to fall out and the foundation starting to crumble, it is self-preservation. What that looks like is distancing. Where does that start to come out? When you're sitting in front of the internal affairs investigator and they start peeling back the layers. These units tend to operate in a silo. Even when I was in the state fire marshal's office, I was on what was called the North team. There was about 7 or 8 of us. Our daily work was just responding and supporting each other. We didn't go to other counties unless there was a major fire that needed some type of additional manpower to work, but they pretty much operate in a silo. So you work very closely with your supervisors, with those colleagues, and especially in investigation where things are held tight to the vest. It's just kind of a natural breeding ground where secrecies of things and the intricacies of things tend to happen.
When I look at this, if there's shady stuff going on with this group of or unit, and I always go back to like Training Day. You look at Training Day and they're out there and they do the drug bust with the guy and they're pulling the curtains and they're like, all right, we're going to take his money. I'm sure stuff like that has happened in history, but that's what I'm getting at, Todd.
And when that happens, that's where you start to see whistleblowers. That's when you start to see a supervisor holding people accountable. That didn't happen here. You'll see internally, police officers, troopers in this case, start to police each other and pull one aside and say, hey, don't ever do that again. I'm not putting my career on the line for you because you can't control your emotion or your poor policing habits or whatever the case is. There's ways to fix it internally, but when it doesn't happen and doesn't get addressed, then it goes the way this whole debacle has gone.
It's also not just poor policing, etc. It's like lack of impulse control. I'm putting myself in the shoes of law enforcement and I'm saying, you know, I'm not going down for the fact that this guy sends inappropriate text messages about a subject of an investigation less than 24 hours into an investigation. And it's this kind of covering up for it, or the liking of text messages with emojis, and the failure to police the police, the failure to monitor themselves.
November 2024, internal findings become public. Tully was ordered to forfeit 6 days of accrued leave for failing to supervise disciplined members of his unit and giving positive evaluations instead of documentation and negative performances. Now we fast forward to September of 2025. Karen Reed's civil strategy implicates and puts Tully in the crosshairs, and her lawyers say they planned claims against him and is later identified as one of the figures due to be deposed. And I think that's happening maybe in about a month or so. I think that's scheduled, or in a couple weeks. And then you have April 2026. NBC Boston reports that Tully retired effectively April 8th, 2026. Here's a good talking point too. Retirement doesn't erase the timeline. And Tully retired only after the trial testimony, IA scrutiny, transfer discipline, and looming civil depositions were already in place. The issue is not just Proctor, it's the supervision. The internal findings against Tully was specifically about failing to supervise and failing to discipline while still praising subordinates in valuations. Why do you think this guy is trying to get out? Do you think it's just a lot of looming stuff that's going to come down and hit here pretty soon that's probably going to fall on his watch, and he just doesn't want to be around and just step away from this? I step away. I can't get disciplined from the MSP. My rank won't drop again. Probably won't affect my salary. I just get out, take my retirement. Yeah, I'm going to have to deal with the Karen Reed civil litigations and depositions. Is that the framing of this situation? Now you got Sandra Birchmore's case that's come up, which is even worse because we just found out federal documents, which he oversaw. And we just found out what? Oh, Matthew Farwell's DNA is on the ligatures that were around Sandra Birchmore's neck, used to kill her.
I tend to focus in on the Karen Reed trials, but there's Birchmore and more, right? We got through the Brian Walsh craziness, but what else is on the table that isn't going away and has some type of federal investigation attached to it?
Dude, you know, like, check out that video when Farwell's going into her house and then he's booking out of there. I mean, that guy's bolting out of there. You know, he's up in that apartment for over 20 minutes. And then she's found the next day, and that's the last person that goes in that apartment. And they go, oh, no, he had nothing to do with it. She unalived himself because she was upset after he left. You know, when I first saw that and heard about that, I'm like, that's hard to believe. And then what? We discovered, what was it, over 35,000 texts, Greeno? Look who they're all connected to. It's that whole gang. It's the Proctor, Tully, Buchanan gang. It's all those guys that are in on this. Go ahead, Nan, you want to jump in there?
Guarino is still actively employed, right? What's the over-under on that lasting long?
Yeah.
I'm interested to see.
You never really get to the conclusion that this podcast has sort of forced us to just enjoy the journey, because there's really not a lot of answers to these crazy things. But what a cool experience it's been. And I think that had we hadn't had those experiences before we started this podcast, we would have ruined it. We would have turned on each other, or we would have made it about us, or we would have wanted it to be a certain way. But I think having failed or kind of succeeded before this, it was really cool timing wise. But I think for me, it's always felt like God is a little distant. He's always far away. I don't understand. Seems like there's a lot of pain. Always feel like I feel intense and it's always hurts. It doesn't feel like that resolves ever. And just that night, it was like called out, and also just like, but I'm here. And a skeptical kid could hear it for the first time. And I think if it wasn't for Blurry, we probably wouldn't have been able to hear these things. It's funny how you can do something like your job and still be the skeptic, you know, still asking the harder questions and going, I don't know, is this guy legit, not legit? I don't know. But we were ready that night to just have a moment. And I'm still unpacking it. I've still been thinking about it since. Like, oh, I remember that's what was said. Wow, that's wild. And usually in my life, the conversations I have for the 50th time, 3 weeks later, 2 months later about an experience, I know that experience was something powerful. So appreciate you coming on and getting me to cry again. Bastard.
My final thought would be, Chris, I love your story, because what I understand is that God will go to extraordinary lengths to speak to us if we want to listen, one. And two, when he does speak, it's, I love you. Come back to me, obey me. It's this beautiful message of a father. God is moving, and I think your story is powerful. And I'm honored that we got to share some of that with our people, because it's
timely.
It's timely and it's amazing.
Yeah. Listen, thanks for letting me come on. But one of the best parts of whatever this is, wherever this is going, is watching God move on a daily basis, just because people are willing to lean in and challenge what they think is real and what's not. I have belief. There's belief in God, and 100% belief in walking in authority of that belief. And I absolutely believe that. But then I'm also skeptical of what I see, man, we're imperfect. And so I think if anything, it makes me hunger that much more to dive into the word, to measure the word and the fruits against what I'm seeing. It's interesting because I've experienced this with my bride, who's amazing. We've talked about this a lot in our office. The evidence of a changed life has nothing to do with the word or anything else. It's, do you love Jesus more? Do you love people more? Do you surrender your own agenda to meet people where they're? That is a Chris I wouldn't have known 5 years ago. And it wasn't because I was trying to drive up a ladder. It was just, I didn't have margin. And it just, the enemy knows how to, kind of pull us away. And but it's really, God is doing something unreal. And we're seeing in live time, literally daily, a supernatural encounter almost every day.
It's been more and more here. I think the only thing we can do here is try to be authentic and real. I think when I walked in the room, I was ready to just, I don't know, God, like, clearly everything I've done in my life is my way. I've screwed a lot of things up. So maybe what's better for the podcast. Maybe what's better for my life. Maybe what's better for my future, my relationships, my friendships. And I would like to get out of the way of that and let you do that. And I think everyone listening in your life, you got to that place, and Luke too. It's like you can iron fist life and try to make it and be successful. And yeah, you can grow your portfolio, but are you happier when you get there? Or are you more fulfilled? Is life full and new and exciting? And it's like Heiser says, bore me with the Bible. And nothing about this is boring, but we make it boring. As we found on Blurry Creatures, it gets weird and fun and fascinating. And it still just feels like we're getting started. So thanks for dropping your ancient Hebrew on us.
Yeah, dude.
Keep sending those words over. I want to hear. I want to hear them.
If you ever do find Bigfoot, I'd love to know, because he's got to be an introvert, and I'm sure he spends a lot of time thinking and has a perspective on how spiders know to put their webs like right at face level when you're walking through the woods.
Well, he's got his own weird language. So if ChatGPT said it was Bigfoot language, we would have had a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, we would definitely. Well, thanks for being a friend, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
This is fun.
Guys like you guys are doing some cool things, man, and you're impacting lives, and I want to encourage you in that. The power of your story is so wild. I think we could have probably spent 6 hours and gone back to 2010 and done all of this, but
thanks
for letting us share that. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
All right.
It's fun.